Story 1. The Campground Stalker. I still check my doors 3 times. Before bed, I still sleep with all the lights on, and I will never, ever go camping again. Those are the words Sarah told me when she shared this story. What happened to her and her 2 children during a simple weekend camping trip will haunt you long after this video ends. It started as the perfect family getaway. Sarah, a recently divorced mother from Ohio, wanted to create new memories with her kids, Emma and Jake. Pine Ridge National Forest seemed like the ideal escape from their recent troubles. The campground had great reviews, beautiful scenery, and most importantly, it felt safe. Sarah had no way of knowing that someone had been watching the campground for months, studying the patterns of families just like hers. Someone who knew exactly which campsite would give him the best view while staying hidden in the shadows. The drive there was filled with excitement. The kids sang songs, played games, and couldn't stop talking about roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. Sarah felt genuinely happy for the first time in months. She thought the hardest part of her life was behind her. She was wrong. They arrived at Pine Ridge on a Friday afternoon in July. Sarah chose campsite 47 because it was set apart from the others, nestled right where the maintained campground ended and the deep woods began. It seemed private and peaceful. The kids immediately ran off to explore while Sarah set up their bright blue tent. She had no idea that those woods held something far more dangerous than bears or snakes, something that had been waiting patiently for the right family to arrive. The first evening was magical. They roasted marshmallows over the campfire, and Sarah told the kids stories about her own childhood camping trips. Emma, who was 8, kept asking if they could live in the woods forever. Jake, only 6, fell asleep in Sarah's lap while she pointed out constellations. As Sarah tucked them into their sleeping bags that night, she felt like she was finally giving her children the stability they needed. The divorce had been hard on all of them, but this trip felt like a fresh start. Around midnight, Sarah was jolted awake by Emma shaking her shoulder. "Mommy, there's someone walking outside." Sarah listened carefully. At first, she only heard the usual forest sounds, crickets chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze, the distant call of an owl. But then she heard it too. Footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps circling their tent. Sarah's blood turned to ice. The footsteps weren't random or hurried, like an animal might make. They were methodical, as if someone was deliberately walking around the perimeter of their campsite. She held Emma close and whispered for her to stay quiet. The footsteps completed one full circle, then another. Sarah could see a shadow moving past the tent wall, distorting the moonlight that filtered through the fabric. Then the footsteps stopped, right at the front of their tent. Sarah could see the outline of a person standing just inches away from the zipper entrance. The figure was tall and completely motionless. Sarah's heart was beating so hard, she was afraid the person outside could hear it. She reached slowly for her phone, but realized she had no cell service this deep in the forest. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, the shadow moved away. The footsteps resumed, but this time they were moving toward the forest. Sarah waited until she couldn't hear them anymore before allowing herself to breathe. Emma had fallen back asleep, but Sarah stayed awake until dawn, listening for any sound that didn't belong. The next morning, Sarah stepped outside to find proof that the night before hadn't been a nightmare. Fresh boot prints circled their tent in the dirt. Large boots, size 11 or 12, with a distinctive tread pattern. The prints were deep and clear, made by someone who wasn't trying to hide their presence. But what made Sarah's stomach drop was where the prints led. They didn't go toward the other campsites or back to the main road. They led directly into the thick forest, where no trails existed. Sarah decided not to tell the kids what had happened. She didn't want to ruin their vacation or scare them unnecessarily. Maybe it was just someone who had gotten confused in the dark. Maybe they were looking for their own campsite and got turned around. Sarah tried to convince herself there was an innocent explanation, but deep down, She knew something wasn't right. They spent Saturday hiking to the lake and swimming in the surprisingly warm water. Jake caught his first fish, and Emma found a perfect skipping stone. For a few hours, Sarah almost forgot about the night before, but every time they passed other campers, she found herself studying their faces, looking for someone who might match the shadow from the previous night. That evening, while they were cooking hot dogs over the fire, Jake suddenly pointed toward the tree line. "Mom, why is that man just standing there?" Sarah looked where he was pointing and felt her breath catch in her throat. About 50 feet away, partially hidden behind a large pine tree, stood a tall figure in dark clothing. The person was completely still, like a statue, watching their campsite. "What man, honey?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady while she reached for her phone to turn on the flashlight. But when the light hit the trees, there was nothing there, just empty forest. "He was right there," Jake insisted. "He was watching us eat." Emma looked scared. "I saw him too, Mommy. He had a big hat on." Sarah shined the flashlight in every direction, but saw nothing unusual. She told the kids it was probably just shadows playing tricks on their eyes, but she didn't believe it herself. Someone was definitely watching them, and that someone was getting bolder. That night, Sarah barely slept. Every sound made her jump. Around 2 a.m. she heard them again, footsteps. But this time, they weren't just circling they were moving around their entire campsite, weaving between the picnic table, the fire pit, and their car. Sarah grabbed her car keys and held them tight, ready to wake the kids and run if necessary. The footsteps stopped right next to their tent, so close that Sarah was sure if she reached out, she could touch whoever was standing there through the fabric. Then she heard something that made her blood freeze. Deep, slow breathing, like someone who had been walking for a long time and was trying to catch their breath. Sarah closed her eyes and prayed that whoever was outside would just leave. But then she heard the worst sound of all, the slow, deliberate sound of the tent zipper being pulled down. Inch by inch, someone was opening their tent. Sarah didn't think. She screamed at the top of her lungs, while simultaneously shaking both kids awake. Get up, right now, we have to go." The zipper immediately stopped moving, and heavy footsteps crashed through the underbrush, running away from their campsite. Sarah grabbed the kids and their car keys, leaving everything else behind. They ran to the car in their pajamas and drove straight to the ranger station. The park ranger on duty, an older man named Bill, took their report seriously. He radioed other rangers and organized a search of the area around campsite 47. What they found made Sarah's decision to leave seem like the smartest thing she'd ever done. Hidden in the woods, about 100 feet from their campsite, was a small camp. Not an official campsite, but a makeshift shelter built from tarps and tree branches. Inside, rangers found a collection of items that had been stolen from other campers over the past several months. Clothes, food, personal belongings, and most disturbing of all, dozens of photographs taken with a telephoto lens of families camping at Pine Ridge. The photographs showed children playing, families eating meals, and parents sleeping in their tent. The pictures were organized by campsite number, and the newest folder was labeled Site 47. It contained over 30 pictures of Sarah and her children, taken from the moment they arrived until the moment they fled. They never caught the person who had been stalking the campground. The makeshift shelter was abandoned when rangers arrived, and there was no trace of whoever had been living there. But based on the evidence, investigators believed the person had been watching families for months, learning their routines and vulnerabilities. Before making them, Sarah and her children drove home that Sunday morning, and she's never been camping since. She still has nightmares about those footsteps circling her tent, and wakes up checking the locks on her doors. The worst part, she says, is not knowing what would have happened if she hadn't woken up when the tent zipper started moving. She prefers not to think about it, but sometimes, late at night, she can still hear that breathing outside her. Story 2. Wrong turn road trip. We should have died that night. The only reason we didn't is because we got lucky, and our attacker made one crucial mistake. Those chilling words come from Mark, a college student who barely survived what was supposed to be a fun road trip with his 3 best friends. Their story will make you think twice about trusting GPS directions, especially when they lead you somewhere that doesn't exist on any official map. It was the summer before their senior year, and Mark wanted to take one last epic road trip with his buddies before they all graduated and went their separate ways. The plan was simple: drive from their college in Michigan to a music festival in Colorado. They'd take their time, see some sights, and make memories that would last a lifetime. Mark's friends Jake, Connor, and Tyler were all on board. They pooled their money, rented a reliable SUV, and mapped out a route that would take them through some beautiful scenery. The first 2 days of the trip were perfect. They drove through Wisconsin and Iowa, stopped at roadside attractions, ate at local diners, and shared stories about their college experiences. They were having the time of their lives. But on the third day, somewhere in rural Nebraska, their GPS started acting strangely. It began with small things. The GPS would lose signal for a few minutes, then reconnect and suggest a slightly different route. Mark didn't think much of it at first. Rural areas often had spotty cell service, but as they drove deeper into farmland, the GPS directions became increasingly bizarre. It told them to turn onto roads that barely qualified as dirt paths, then corrected itself and sent them back to the highway. Connor, who was navigating, suggested they ignore the GPS and stick to major roads, but Mark was concerned about gas. They were getting low, and the GPS was promising a gas station just ahead if they followed its directions. Against his better judgment, Mark decided to trust the technology. The GPS directed them off the interstate onto a state highway, then onto a county road, then onto what appeared to be a private gravel road, cutting through endless cornfields. The sun was setting, painting the sky a deep orange, and the isolation was starting to make everyone uncomfortable. There were no houses, no other cars, and definitely no gas stations. "This doesn't feel right," Tyler said from the back seat. "We haven't seen another car in 20 minutes. Mark was about to turn around when they saw it, a small building sitting at a crossroads ahead, with a flickering sign that read, "Last Stop Gas." It looked old and run down, but it was exactly what they needed. Mark pulled up to the single gas pump while the others went inside to buy snacks and ask for direction. The inside of the gas station looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Dusty shelves held outdated products, and the fluorescent lights flickered constantly. Behind the counter sat an older man with long greasy hair and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in weeks. He was reading a magazine and didn't look up when the boys entered. Connor approached the counter. "Excuse me, sir. We're trying to get back to Interstate 80. Our GPS seems to be malfunctioning." The man slowly raised his head and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. His teeth were yellow, and several were missing. "GPS don't work too good out here," he said in a gravelly voice. "Lots of folks get lost, but don't you worry. I can help you boys out." Jake noticed that the man's eyes kept darting toward the windows, as if he was checking to see if anyone else was with them. The silence stretched uncomfortably until Tyler cleared his throat. "So which way should we go to get back to the interstate?" "Well now," the man said, standing up slowly. He was taller than they'd expected, with broad shoulders and hands that looked like they'd seen years of hard labor. "That depends on how much of a hurry you're in. There's a shortcut, but it goes through some rough territory. Most folks don't like to take it after dark." Mark, who had finished pumping gas, entered the store just as the man was speaking. Something about the situation felt wrong. The store was too quiet, too isolated, and the man behind the counter was making everyone uncomfortable. "Actually, we'll just stick to major roads," Mark said. "If you could just point us toward the nearest highway, we'll be fine." The man's smile widened. "I'm afraid it's not that simple, son. See, there's construction on the main route. Road's been closed for weeks. The only way out of here is the back road I was telling your friends about. It's a bit rough, but it'll get you where you need to go." Mark looked out the window and noticed something that made his stomach drop. Their SUV was no longer alone at the gas pump. Two pickup trucks had appeared, seemingly from nowhere,
parked in a way that would make it difficult for Mark to pull out quickly. The trucks were old and beat up, with darkly tinted windows that made it impossible to see who was inside. "Those your friends out there?" Mark asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Just some locals," the man replied. "They're probably just curious about strangers passing through. We don't get many visitors out here." Connor had noticed the trucks too and was moving toward the door. "Well, thanks for your help. We should get going before it gets too dark." "Now hold on," the man said, his voice suddenly more forceful. "You boys seem like you're in an awful hurry. Why don't you stay for a while? I've got cold beer in the back, and my friends outside would love to meet you." That's when Mark realized they were in serious trouble. The man wasn't trying to help them. He was trying to keep them there. Mark caught Connor's eye and nodded toward the door. They needed to leave immediately. "Thanks, but we really need to get going," Mark said, backing toward the exit. "Our families are expecting us." The man's friendly facade completely dropped. "I don't think you understand, boy. You're not going anywhere." Mark, Connor, Jake and Tyler ran for the door simultaneously. Behind them, they heard the man shouting something they couldn't understand. As they burst out of the store, the doors of both pickup trucks opened and several men emerged. In the dim light, Mark couldn't see their faces clearly, but he could see that at least one of them was carrying something that looked like a rifle. "Get in the car! Get in the car!" Mark screamed as he fumbled with his keys. The engine turned over just as one of the men from the trucks reached their vehicle. Mark floored the gas pedal and their SUV lurched forward, nearly hitting one of the pickup trucks as they escaped the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, Mark could see the men running back to their trucks. Within seconds, both vehicles were pursuing them down the dark gravel road. Mark pushed the SUV as fast as he dared on the narrow winding path, but the pickup trucks were gaining on them. These men knew the roads, and they were determined not to let the college students escape. "There," Connor shouted, pointing ahead. "I can see lights." In the distance, Mark could make out what looked like a small town. Street lights, houses, maybe even other people who could help them, but they had to get there first. And the pickup trucks were getting closer. Mark could hear the roar of their engines, and see their headlights reflecting in his mirrors. The first truck pulled alongside them and tried to force them off the road. Mark jerked the steering wheel to avoid collision, sending their SUV skidding dangerously close to a drainage ditch. The second truck was trying to get in front of them, attempting to box them in. "They're trying to surround us," Tyler said, his voice shaking with terror. Mark made a split-second decision that probably saved their lives. Instead of continuing toward the town, he suddenly turned onto what appeared to be a farm road, leading in the opposite direction. The pickup trucks, traveling at high speed, couldn't react quickly enough to follow. Mark had bought them precious seconds. The farm road led them through more cornfields before eventually connecting to a paved county road. Mark didn't slow down until they reached a larger town with police station. They immediately reported what had happened, providing descriptions of the gas station, the man and the pickup trucks. The police took their report seriously and sent officers to investigate. What they found was disturbing. The building that had appeared to be Last Stop Gas was actually an abandoned gas station that had been closed for over 10 years. There was no working gas pump, no electricity, and certainly no man behind the counter. The building was empty except for old debris and animal nests, but there were signs that someone had been using the location recently. Fresh tire tracks, cigarette butts, and most unsettling of all, personal items that appeared to have belonged to other travelers. Wallets, driver's licenses, jewelry and car keys were scattered throughout the building. Some of the licenses were years old, suggesting this had been going on for a long time. The police theorized that Mark and his friends had encountered a group of criminals who used the isolated location to target vulnerable travelers. The fake gas station was bait, designed to lure people who were lost and low on fuel. The GPS malfunctions were likely caused by a signal jammer, a device that could interfere with satellite signals and cause navigation systems to provide incorrect directions. No arrests were ever made. Despite an extensive investigation, police couldn't identify the men who had chased the students. The abandoned gas station was demolished a few months later, and warning signs were posted throughout the area, to alert travelers about the dangers of following GPS directions onto unmarked roads. Mark and his friends never made it to the music festival. They drove straight home, shaken by how close they'd come to becoming victims. Mark still wonders what would have happened if they hadn't run when they did. The personal items found at the fake gas station suggest that other travelers weren't as fortunate. To this day, Mark doesn't trust GPS systems completely. He always carries physical maps and tells other people his travel plans before leaving on road trips. He's also learned to trust his instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is, and sometimes the technology we rely on can be turned against us by people with very bad intention. I kept telling myself there had to be a logical explanation, but some things can't be explained by logic, and some guests never really leave. Those are the words of Jennifer, a marketing executive from Chicago, who rented what she thought was the perfect beach house for a week-long vacation with her sister. What happened during that week changed Jennifer's perspective on the supernatural forever, and left her with an experience she'll never be able to forget. Jennifer had been working 60-hour weeks for months, and desperately needed a break. When her sister Rachel suggested they rent a beach house on the North Carolina coast, Jennifer jumped at the opportunity. She found a beautiful 3-bedroom house right on the beach through a vacation rental website. The photos showed a stunning oceanfront property, with a wraparound deck, floor-to-ceiling windows and direct beach access. The reviews were mostly positive, though Jennifer noticed a few mentions of unusual sounds and strange atmosphere. She dismissed these as complaints from overly sensitive guests who weren't used to staying in older beach houses. The property was managed by an elderly local woman named Mrs. Patterson, who met them at the house to provide keys and give them a tour. Miss Patterson seemed nervous and kept glancing around as if she was expecting someone else to appear. She showed them the basic amenities quickly and seemed eager to leave. "Just a few things to keep in mind," Mrs. Patterson said as she headed toward the door. "The house is old, built in 1952, so you might hear some settling noises at night. The previous guest left some items in the master bedroom closet. I haven't had a chance to remove them yet, so just ignore anything you might find in. And if you experience any unusual occurrences, please don't hesitate to call me." Jennifer thought it was an odd thing to say, but she was too tired from the drive to ask questions. She and Rachel spent their first afternoon unpacking, exploring the beach, and planning their week of relaxation. The house was even more beautiful than the photos had suggested. Large windows provided stunning ocean views from every room, and the sound of waves was incredibly soothing. That first night, Jennifer chose the master bedroom while Rachel took the guest room down the hall. The master bedroom was spacious and comfortable, with French doors that opened onto a private section of the deck. Jennifer fell asleep quickly, lulled by the rhythmic sound of the ocean. She woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of dripping water.